Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Hardcore Finance Show with Shimon and Alex. Today we're walking in New York. We just passed Soho, going into NoHo, all the Houston coordinates. And we actually just got off of a very interesting phone call with our producers at Defiance Media, which helped syndicate our show. They gave us some feedback, said walking episodes, definitely good. Then they also said, hey, we should be a little bit more, thoughtful about the topics we talk about, because sometimes we meander. Do we meander?
Hey, look at this umbrella.
Ooh, nice umbrella. And never mind. So Mark, who runs Defiance, CEO, and Cookie, who's this excellent producer, said, just put some thoughts on paper before you talk about it. And Shimon and I started walking and thinking, what's the identity of the show? What should we be? And so Shimon had an interesting perspective where we both share this perspective about why we actually, consider and talk about money and investments and value in this way. So I'll let you, what's our identity, Shimon?
So basically, when we think about it, what's fun is we like to be contrarian. We don't like to just parrot, what Wall Street, the analyst consensus and stuff. But we also are optimistic. So contrarian and optimistic, which is interesting. For me, the way this manifests is in two main things. One, the optimism lets me drown out the noise. So whenever people are like, oh, interest rates just went up by 75 basis points, the economy is crashing. Last time it took 20 years for it to recover. Now it's gonna take maybe less because there's more debt, whatever. That's the micro. But the macro is that I'm optimistic. I think that humanity will find a way to grow. And then that means that investments should also grow. So that's one. And then the other thing is the techno part, the technology part. So if you think about why technology is so powerful, it basically allows you to be more efficient at how you use energy. So have calories or joules going in, and then you have output. And so we've become better and better. For example, in the beginning, we had those energy units shoved into a mouth of a water buffalo, and then the water buffalo helps you till the field. And
those energy units are called grass.
So grass is made out of joules. A calorie is 4 joules, if I remember correctly from my biochemistry class. But anyway, my point is, so humanity has been very good at using energy better. So instead of feeding a cow and then tilling the thing, now you have a GPS powered harvester that knows exactly, how much fertilizer to put in every unit of ground, and then the output is much more per energy unit. But there's one thing that humanity hasn't invested a lot in the last 70 years. It is the energy itself. We've only thought of there's cheaper energy over there, let's import it, like Russia, like Saudi Arabia. But just think of how many wars have been fought over energy. All of the Middle Eastern wars, the Russia-Ukraine war, the Syrian civil war, we've spoken about this in the podcast. And so my optimism on this issue comes that because of this unique circumstance of the war, people will actually innovate in how to generate local energy that's cheaper. And it's pretty much the first time in the last 70 years that people had an incentive to. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, and look, and we both have this interesting perspective, by the way, because we're both immigrants. We both came to this country and actually seen how technology has dramatically improved the lives in America versus, Ukraine for me and Bulgaria, Shimon, and then in Israel. Yeah, in Israel, you saw it actually changing life. I saw before and after Ukraine to the U.S. You saw it changing in Israel. Mm-hmm. Let's touch upon that. But so we've experienced it. It's one thing about talking about it theoretically, and the other thing of actually experiencing it. And I think this is why we both went into tech. So Shimon was in many startups, doing essentially CMO positions and in many tech industries. I was advising tech companies at the Boston Consulting Group and at Microsoft. And so we've seen these things play out as a consumer, as experiencing it, and advising companies at the highest levels of Microsoft and in the BCG, we would advise all of the top companies, Microsoft being one of the top 2 companies in the world. So we've actually seen it. By the way, this is beautiful New York, Washington Square Park. Oh, I love New York in the fall. People doing whatever it is that they're doing.
People do these things all season. So.
Yeah, enjoy their life. How was it for you? Oh, so sorry, before we go there, I think we're gonna orient this podcast from now on not just on finance, although finance is at the core of everything we talk about from a value perspective, right? We ultimately, just like you can measure energy in calories and joules, we can measure utility we can measure benefits and utility and in some sort of monetary gain. Not money for money's purpose just by itself, but money is a means to an end. And so we'll do this podcast hardcore finance, but very much a technology, optimistic based perspective on the future. And we'll try to take all of the, when things are bad, we'll say things are bad, but we'll try to give a positive spin. So if you want some sort of hopium and to feel good a little bit about how to get out of very certain situations, maybe tune into us. So on that note, can we talk a little bit about Israel? Did you see it actually technology actually changing for you when you were there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the main thing about Israel was fascinating because in the 80s, they kind of almost went bankrupt. And then they went to the Americans and were like, look, we can default on our debt, but please save us because, we are your important ally in the Middle East. So, you have an interest of us having a stable economy.
Stable ambulances in New York.
Yeah, that's the status quo in New York. So anyway,
this is real, audience. This is real.
So anyway, so then the Americans, thank God, they were very smart. They said, sure, we'll bail you out, but the condition is you guys have to open your markets completely. Now the thing is, the Jewish engineering mind has always been good. Nobel prizes won by Jews are way over-indexed. But in Israel, it was a very socialist country. It was founded by Russians who were socialists. And so in the beginning, everything was a monopoly, a state monopoly. So even though the engineering power was there, the mind was there, they didn't have to compete. And so because they didn't have to compete on a global scale, the politics and other suboptimal ways of designing stuff was rampant. So nobody bought Israeli stuff except for military, just because in the military you kind of are competing on a global scale because all the Arabs were getting the Russian arsenal, and the Russians are pretty good actually at making weapons. So if we wanted to compete literally on the battlefield, we had to design things that are better than the Russians, which were best in class, or together with the Americans. So that's why up until the late 80s, Israel was pretty much only exporting either agriculture or weapons. But then in the 80s, after the US made Israel open up in all industries, suddenly now we have two industries that are literally world class. There's the tech industry, where you can see startups per capita and success of those startups and so forth. We're number 2 after maybe we're even number 1. But anyway, very, very successful. And then now oil and gas, they discovered a bunch of gas, and from what I'm understanding, I'm not like an expert, but they're very, very good at extracting. It's all American companies like Chevron and stuff, but still, there's lots of Jewish engineering there. And so for me, those two things just say you need good regulation that doesn't get in your way or maybe even promotes, like the Americans forced Israel to open up, and good, hardworking people. And then you can create growth. And the nice thing is that can be replicated everywhere. I don't think there's anything special about Israel. Look at Singapore, look at Hong Kong, look at Dubai. There's many, many places that have been able to replicate it, because guess what? Even if you don't have the engineering power in-house, if you just have a good regulatory environment, you can import engineering know-how. Alex, how has it been for you coming to this country, or your experiences?
Similar. I do want to touch upon the regulatory environment, because it's very key to a lot of things that we talk about, and sometimes we come off as anti-regulation. I'm not anti-regulation. I was talking today to someone we're here in New York at the crypto conference in mainnet, and somebody asked me today, it's like, what are you most excited about? And my answer is regulation. Just get over it, just let's go. Bring it. I'm confident that the US won't kill crypto. In fact, I know that they don't want to. But give us regulation. give us rules of the road so people can innovate. And this is the same thing coming from the former Soviet Union. I was a child, but you can see this very directly in the Russian-Ukrainian war, about when you have a corrupt system, when people are just incentivized to take and take for themselves, and do only what's in their SOP, if you will, or what's in their line of work. I'm a widget maker and that's all I do, and not innovate, not go outside the lines because the government and other regulation are gonna screw you if you do. The whole thing falters. Here's a great example. One of our earliest episodes, I forgot when this was. This is before the Biden election. We should link to this, so we will. When we talked about what does it mean to have the US dollar be the reserve currency, and can anything else be the reserve currency? And one of the major theses that we talked about was this, maybe it's a little cheesy, but it's thesis of kind of love. Love conquers all. And in this case, in economics, love is kind of openness. When you allow people to choose, and they choose to be in your economy, in your country, it's much stronger than when you force them. Like a prime example right now is Russia. They just yesterday, on the 21st September, they announced that they're going to conscript people into the army. And people who are looking to leave, let's say leave Russia altogether, young men, they're closing the border and not allowing people to leave. So regardless of what we think about the Russian-Ukrainian war, and clearly I wanted to stop. I think Putin is a madman, and I'm very much against the war. But if you're Russia and you want to actually accomplish something, why would you put people in your ranks that you're forcing to put in who are not motivated and will likely sabotage the fight? It never works. Same thing in markets. When the government comes in and forces the closure of something instead of giving people the choice and educating them about the choice, it doesn't ultimately work in the long run. Have you experienced this?
Well, yeah, definitely I've experienced this. Israel is actually very good at that. There's two examples. One is if you, let's say you don't want to go to the army in Israel, they never close the border. They always let people leave, but then if you defected from the army, they just don't let you come back into the country for like 7 years or something. And the idea, it's kind of genius, because it's like, yeah, you don't want to lock people inside that oppose you. Just let them leave. And it's the same. We had, I think, a member of parliament that was doing espionage for Hezbollah. And so They were like, yeah, he was telling them, they were shooting missiles and he was telling them exactly where they fell or something like that. And so what the Israelis did is the security service just called him and is like, hey, we're thinking of arresting you for espionage. You need to come for an interrogation like 3 days from now. And so he immediately fled to Dubai, and since then he's in Dubai. And so we don't have to deal with someone, getting trials and you have to prove it or whatever.
Self-selection.
Yeah, so it's I didn't understand Russia. I really hope the problem with Russia is that they're so big and they have so many reserves in terms of resources. I heard a podcast about, they can't import stuff, but they actually can import stuff from China and India, and let's see how long they can go. I really hope that now that he's conscripting people, by the way, in the beginning he said he's only conscripting reservists. But now on Twitter you see IT people that have never held a gun and they get the note that they have.
People get into car accidents, and the police is writing them a ticket. And some random does a video. A random guy comes up, he's like, "You're conscripting the guy," and the driver was like, "Why? Send it to my address." He's like, "Who are you?" To the guy who's conscripting him. It doesn't matter who I am. Here's a conscription. Oh no, it's so he didn't end up getting it, but it's just lunacy what's happening, right? And you wouldn't think that a major, call it developed or semi-developed country is going to have this, but they do. They do. So the point is, any kind of closed system or a system with harsh regulations will ultimately, where those regulations seem super harsh, is going to fail. The U.S. war on drugs, same thing. Those commercials, this is your brain on weed, and it's just this hard coming after marijuana. We spend how many billions, trillions? I don't know the right statistic, but definitely tens of billions of dollars at the very least on marijuana, like fighting the marijuana war. Why? Now they're taxing it, and it's recreational illegal pretty much everywhere. Like it didn't stop, but they wasted money. Instead, all these years they could have been collecting tax revenue. We would have been exactly where we are now. Yeah. Maybe even better. Another anecdote is all of us.
Well, at least here in the U.S., if they catch you smoking weed, they don't conscript you to the army.
That's true.
You have that to be grateful.
In Russia, you're in jail for 7 years because you had weed residue. Like I forgot the WNBA player's name. Poor woman who's in a Russian jail. It's just a political stunt, obviously, but she's on the front end of the Brittany. I forgot her name. She's one of the WNBA players.
They like doing that stuff. There was an Israeli stoner that was from India, was traveling back to Israel, and somehow the plane landed in Russia unexpectedly.
Oh my God!
And then they found some weed, an insignificant amount of weed in her luggage, and they're same thing, 10 years in jail. And then they swapped her for this hardcore Russian hacker that had been hacking into the Pentagon or something and was arrested in Israel. Yeah. And they were like, oh yeah, you want this one? Send us this one.
So for her weed.
It was just a random person.
Yeah.
It's so sad. I mean, seeing these regimes just makes me a little bit lose faith in humanity.
For sure. And seeing the fact that people are ultimately okay with it, or it's easy for us to talk about it here. It's oh, they should rise up. It's hard. You can literally get shot in Russia right now in the protests. Some people that are protesting the war, they get arrested and the police station get automatically conscripted. It's just it's kicking them when they're down. But then again, everything has a price. You lived in Russia with 10% tax or 15% tax and lawlessness, and anybody could become rich. Everything has a price. Overall, in the long run, this is another, I guess, theme of ours. Markets are fairly efficient. Nothing is free. When things seem to be too good to be true, they likely are. Except for investing in Bitcoin. Please don't be stupid and buy some Bitcoin. Not financial advice. Not financial advice. If it was up to me, I would. Not financial advice. Do your own research. But if it seems to be too good to be true, it often is. And what happens is at some point, you pay the piper and regulation comes, or the government just clamps down. Like in Russia, it's not regulation. They just wrote a law overnight. It's oh, well, now this is illegal, what you've been doing before because we wrote a law, or now you can go to the army. By the way, they're conscripting not 300,000 people, but people saw the text 1 million. It plans for 1 million men to conscript in the army. It's crazy to go fight and die. Anyway, what brings us back to what we know our identity.
But what makes you optimistic about this war, Alex? I'm not gonna let you off the hook.
Yeah, no, don't let me off the hook.
Say one good thing.
Yeah. The one major, well, there are two good things. One is the world is coming off of dollars, which is good and bad. Good is that we've been, a lot of countries are rightfully upset with the U.S. because we've been bullying a lot of small countries around. We really have. And a lot of it's because of the dollar system or the petrodollar system. And for those of you who don't know, the petrodollar basically is the U.S. negotiated trade of oil, petroleum, to be denominated in dollars. So people are forced to buy dollars to settle debts, especially oil trade, and then U.S. and other debts are denominated in dollars. And that's good because I actually am okay with the U.S. losing a little bit of power here, because it will bring power to stable coins like USDT and USDC and crypto. I think the second good thing is that we talked about a lot is that it forces people off of the Russian gas system. And it forces the Europeans to wake up. They've been sleeping on this problem for a while. It's like sleeping in a cage with a tiger. And people are yelling, hey, there's a tiger in the cage. And they're like, oh, it's sleeping. Well, the tiger woke up and he just mauled you. So the Putin, or the bear, I guess in this case, the Russian bear woke up and he just mauled Europe.
Siberian tiger.
The Siberian tiger. He bit. And the faster we can get off of Russian oil and Russian gas and go nuclear, finally Europeans are waking up to this. And hopefully this whole ESG, nuclear not being part of ESG bullshit narrative goes away. But the Europeans are waking up to this now, and I really hope that the world builds more nuclear stations. And I'll say the last thing, because I want to hear your opinion of why this is the positive of the war, is that a lot of safety concerns with nuclear that we have now are based on old technology. Remember, nuclear power stations are fairly young. You know, we had the bomb in 1945, 1950s and 60s, 70s, when a lot of these plants were built. The technology is good. That's only 20 years after the technology was invented. Since then, you know, since the 70s, we're 50 years ahead. We more than doubled, you know, this is 3x the lifespan between when they created nuclear technology into making power plants. The power plants now are smaller, safer, more efficient, and so on and so forth. And even a lot of times you see on the news, the Russians are shelling these nuclear power plants in Ukraine. Well, the ugly truth is, while it's terrible, and an accident can happen, an accident will be terrible, they moped. They are actually made to withstand missiles hitting the nuclear power plants, and this is in the 70s they built.
Yeah, I heard a podcast now that they have a method where if things start getting out of control, there's like a way to just poison the whole thing and shut it down immediately, and then it's like a really costly process to clean it up. It's almost like it destroys like half of the value of the power plant, but it's pretty much fail-proof. Like even if you have a missile that hits you, you have enough time. It's like an automatic system that just like poisons the water. I mean, poison in the sense that it stops the reaction. And so this is like a relatively very new technology. My point is, look, we spoke about, do you have anything else to say about
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so the one thing that you said that actually makes me very bullish, this whole idea of getting off the dollar, you know, some people argue, is it good or is it bad? Hard to know, because like the good aspects of this is that it's like it's good for American manufacturing. The dollar would be less strong, which means we can, you know, manufacture things here and export them elsewhere. It's bad for imports, but forget about that. I'm just thinking, just like Israel, where everything was a monopoly, things weren't run really efficiently. And I think when the US had to compete with the USSR, they had pressure to just like be good, you know, be efficient. You listen to some of the things from the politicians today, it just sounds like sloppy. I'm not even disagreeing with them, it's just sloppy arguments. So like, sure, you want to be a socialist, give me a good argument on why socialism, but like don't make a sloppy argument. Like you look at even Biden now tweeted, oh, finally corporations will be taxed. It's like, what are you talking about? Even if you take everybody's wealth, you can't even pay the debt. Like it's not as simple as raising taxes. Like if it was simple to raise taxes, they could have done it last year, they could have done it 2 years ago, they could have done it like during Bill Clinton. Like it's not easy. So just don't do sloppy things. And I think the more now we get into a multipolar world where the US has actually to compete with some, I mean, look, Chinese people are smart, Russian people are smart. If you just look at IQ, they're not like stupid people. Yeah. So competing is good. So that's one thing that makes me happy, that we're gonna slowly get off the dollar.
Yeah, look, I mean, I kind of agree with that. Before I was hesitant to agree because I'm a little bit more kind of loyal or partisan, like, yeah, USA, and I do love this country a lot. Well, there is something to be said about being in a position, in a leadership position for so long, you become complacent. We become complacent, and you can see where our policies are too. We're so polarized, Democrats versus Republicans, abortion or not. Like, what? We're talking about abortion in 2020 when there are real problems in the world. We've been very privileged in the US not to face any kind of hardship that a lot of the other people around the world have faced, or actual competition, right? And look, I think it'll make us better in the long run, and only because we believe in the same system. American system has been built upon competition. We always talk about, hey, it's bad to have monopolies, it's good to have companies that compete with each other. Why not countries? Yeah. Why do we stop? Why aren't our politicians a lot more responsible or accountable for the policies they put in?
This reminds me of a meme that we have in the Lazarov household. I don't know how many of you are Sound of Music fans, the classic musical, and then Family Guy fans. The overlap of these two, the Venn diagram, if you will, is the Lazarov family. There's a really amazing episode in Family Guy where they spoof the Sound of Music, and like Stewie comes like says, I have a sore finger, like Liesel in The Sound of Music. And then Peter is like, the Nazis are trying to take over the country. We have bigger problems right now. So it's the same. That's what I want to tell the ESG people and all the like. My father again was a nuclear engineer. He told me about all these environmental groups. It's like, okay, we have bigger problems right now.
That's true. That's very true. On the note, new thanks Mark and Cookie. Thanks Shimon. Thanks for listening to us while we walk and cruise the streets of New York. A new Hardcore Finance Show identity is coming to you. This is Shimon and Alex. Good night.
Until next time.
Until next time.